A Hobby's Tale by Boylei Hobby Time. Chapter 1. Concerning Hobbies. For the month of August, my patrons voted on bridges as the theme for the monthly art challenge, so naturally, I decided to do something with this iconic bearded man, Jeff Bridges. Just kidding. I'm going to be recreating Gandalf's encounter with the Balrog of Morgoth on the Bridge of Khazad-Dum. This is one of the most iconic scenes from the trilogy, and I've seen many talented people recreate it, but I never have, so I decided to give it a shot. I snipped the Balrog off his sprues, and then I prepped the miniature by scraping off the mold lines and the sprue marks. I'm going to be including some lights on this Balrog, including some light up flames on his back. It comes with a molded plastic dorsal flame, which I will be substituting for some cotton flames. In order to get the light to pass through, I will need to cut out the middle section of this back piece. I routed a major artery from the Balrog's foot to its hip to run some wires that will supply the power to the lights. I also hollowed out a section of the mouth so that the glow from the body would be visible from the mouth as well. I then cut out the middle section of that back piece, and I filed the edges to clean up the cut, and then I also cut the plastic whip that came with the Balrog to give me a nice clean Balrog fist to work with. I then assembled the Balrog partially, leaving areas open that would give me access to the electronics later. The last destructive customization I made was to drill some holes through both eyes in order to allow for some fiber optics to bring a glow to his eyes later on. Next, it was time to work on the bridge. I started with this pre-made base from the hobby store, and then I broke out some foam. I knew I wouldn't have enough room to build the whole bridge on this little base, so I decided to only build the middle section with Gandalf and the side of the bridge with the Balrog, as opposed to just the middle section or the side with the flying fools on it. I wanted some nice rock texture on the side of the cliff, so I used these rock molds to create some plaster rocks. I mixed up some plaster, water, and a touch of Mod Podge to make these rocks a little less brittle, give them some added durability, and after I had filled my little trays with plaster, I tapped them gently to get rid of all the bubbles, and then I placed them aside to set. I then moved back to the base, and I used a piece of a translucent file folder to transfer the shape of the base to a piece of cardboard, and then from that piece of cardboard over to the foam. This is a cool trick that I learned from Night Shift. I made 2 layers of those rounded foam pieces, and then I rounded off a section of the bridge, and I glued all the pieces together with some foam-safe superglue. I then marked out a spot where Durin's Bane's foot would be, as well as where Gandalf would be standing, and I decided on the positioning of the battery housing. I then marked out the outline of the housing on the bottom of the base, and I used my Dremel drill press to cut it out. I drilled a hole in all 4 corners, and then I routed a line in between. It's not the prettiest cut in the world, but it'll work for me. I also made a little spot in the foam to hide the rest of the wiring, and then I glued the bridge and the base together. I then drilled some holes through the foam, and I embedded some styrene tubes to act as conduit for the wiring. Gandalf's wires had quite a distance to travel at an awkward angle, so I used the long thin tip on my foam knife to make the hole. I then installed that styrene tube, and by this point the plaster rocks had set enough to be removed from their molds. I carefully removed the rocks, and then I shook off all the extra dust. And those molds were ready to use next time. I built up the rock wall in a natural looking way, and I only used a few of the plaster rocks that I made, so I had a bunch of leftovers, which is pretty great because it's always fun to make additions to my growing plaster rock collection. After cleaning up my workstation, I made a terrain paste using plaster, paint, Mod Podge, and some fine grit sand. which I spread all over the exposed foam. I made sure to leave some toothpicks in my styrene conduit to make sure that did not get blocked. Once the base had been thoroughly frosted, I removed the placeholder toothpicks and I set the base aside to dry. I then moved back to the Balrog and I added the wires to those routed paths that I carved earlier. I then connected my wires in his arm to the wires in his leg, and I also connected a filament to where the positive and negative leads connected. I tested my circuit, ensured that it worked, before sealing up his back and adding his wings. I used some putty to fill the larger gaps between the pieces, except for the ones that I missed, and then I masked off the filament for priming. I also added some LEDs to the top of Gandalf's staff, and I wrapped the wires in a way that would hopefully blend in after he was fully painted. I took the Balrog, Gandalf, and the Bridge of Khazad-Dum outside and I primed them all matte black before painting them. If you're not familiar with the story, at this point Gandalf is still Gandalf the Grey. After falling into the depths of Middle-earth, Gandalf and the Balrog fight for 11 days, on top of a mountain. Gandalf beats the Balrog, and for his accomplishments, and also because Saruman the White Wizard is now evil, Gandalf is leveled up and sent back as Gandalf the White to fulfill the role of the White Wizard. The ranking system of wizards in Middle-earth is a little confusing, but imagine that there are 5 kids in your karate class. There's 1 kid with a white belt, 1 with a gray belt, 1 with a brown belt that likes animals, and 2 with blue belts. White belt kid is the highest level and the most powerful, but if they turn evil and one of the other kids is able to kill a flaming demon, they will be given a white belt, and they can go replace the previous white belt holder. I wanted the diorama to look displayable even when the lights were off, so I gave some coloring to the bridge before moving on to the Balrog. I started by adding white to all the areas that needed to look like they were on fire, as well as all the places that would have light cast onto them by the fire. As I said a second ago, the intention is for the diorama to be displayable with or without the lights, so I wanted the model to look like it was glowing either way. Fun fact, this is actually the second Balrog I've ever painted on this channel. I took down the other video because I got made fun of in the comments for my bad paint job and terrible commentary, so I'm viewing this video as a redo and a great opportunity to be made fun of again. After layering up the flame colors, I went back and I painted some of the Balrog's skin with black. Then I reapplied some warmth over top of that, and I dry brushed some ashy gray over all the black areas that I wanted highlighted. After that, the paint job for the Balrog was done. Next, it was time to figure out the Balrog's flaming whip. I measured out a piece of copper wire to the length of my filament and I bent it into a flaming whip-like shape. I soldered the filament to one end of the wire and then I tied the filament along the wire with small pieces of a cocktail straw. I had to do it this way because almost nothing sticks to the silicone that the filaments are coated with, and those straw pieces were the least visible way I could think of tying the filament in place. I put the whip in the Balrog's hand, I glued Gandalf into place, and then I connected all the wiring to the battery housing and a switch in the base. I then glued the Balrog in position and I added some final touches with the airbrush, and the very last thing to do was to paint the abyss with black 3.0. After that, I called it good. Before moving on to my glamour shots, please take a moment to admire these beautiful bridges submitted by my awesome patrons. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons, and an extra shout out to everyone who participated in the art challenge last month. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you next time.